Welcome back to LPBW Update, where we dig deep into the reality behind the reality TV cameras. And today we have a story that is going to absolutely shake the foundations of Roloff Farms. We are talking about the most explosive, jaw-dropping conclusion to the long-standing feud between Amy, Matt, and Caryn that we have ever seen. You thought the farm negotiations were messy. You thought the divorce was bitter. You haven't heard anything yet. We have received exclusive details regarding a massive lawsuit that has reportedly just concluded in Amy Roloff's favor, involving a shady moving company, a $50,000 kickback scheme, and a verdict that forces Matt and Caryn to pay up $250,000 to Amy. This is the story of how Amy's emotional departure from the big house was allegedly turned into a grift by the people she trusted least, and how she turned the tables to win the ultimate revenge. You are not going to want to miss a single second of this breakdown, because the details regarding the lost heirlooms and the secret testimony from an ex-wife are pure gold. Before we dive into this bombshell report, I need you to do me a huge favor. If you love Little People, Big World, and want to stay on top of the news that the network tries to hide, please hit that like button right now. It helps the channel so much. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We are building the biggest community of truth seekers in the LPBW fan base, and you need to be here for the next update. Now, let's get into the scandal that everyone is whispering about. To understand the magnitude of this lawsuit and this alleged scam, we have to go back to one of the most painful periods in the show's history. We have to talk about the move. For over 30 years, Amy Roloff lived in that farmhouse. It wasn't just a structure of wood and drywall, it was the heart of her family. It was where she raised Jeremy, Zach, Molly, and Jacob. It was where every Christmas was celebrated, where the pumpkin season chaos was managed, and where she thought she would grow old. When the divorce happened, and eventually the buyout negotiations began, we all saw how emotional it was. The camera showed us the tears and the hesitation, but what they didn't show us was the nitty-gritty of the legal agreements taking place behind closed doors. According to insider reports and new theories emerging from sources close to the production, the final agreement for Amy to leave the main house included a very specific clause. Because Matt was pushing so hard for her to leave, and because he wanted the property cleared out on a specific timeline to begin his renovations or potential sales, he agreed to cover the full financial cost of the move. This was supposed to be a peace offering. Matt Roloff, with his vast resources and business connections, was going to handle the logistics and the bill. It was meant to take the burden off Amy's shoulders. She just had to pack her life into boxes, and Matt would ensure they got to her new home safely. However, this is where things reportedly took a dark turn. Matt, being the busy guy he is, or perhaps just wanting to avoid dealing with Amy directly, allegedly delegated the entire organization of the move to Caryn Chandler. Now, on the surface, this makes sense. Caryn was the farm manager. She organizes things for a living. But given the personal animosity and the history there, handing the keys to Amy's entire life over to the woman who replaced her was a recipe for disaster. And if these new reports are to be believed, it wasn't just negligence. It was a calculated opportunity for profit. The narrative that is coming out now suggests that Caryn didn't go to a reputable national moving chain. She didn't hire a company with 5-star reviews and insurance policies that cover high-value items. Instead, insiders claim she reached out to a personal friend, someone who owned a small, unlicensed, and struggling moving operation. This wasn't a professional outfit. This was, as later described in court documents, a guy with a truck and some buddies. So why would Caryn do this? Why risk the wrath of Amy and the potential legal blowback? The theory that was presented in this alleged lawsuit is shocking. It claims that Caryn and this moving company owner cooked up a scheme to defraud Matt and, by extension, hurt Amy. The plan was simple but malicious. The moving company would submit a massively inflated invoice to Matt. We are talking about a bill for $50,000. For a local move, even a large one, that is an astronomical figure. But Matt, trusting Caryn's management and just wanting the problem of the move to go away, would cut the check. Here is the kicker. The moving company wasn't going to keep that full $50,000. The alleged agreement was that the owner would keep $20,000. Still a huge overpayment for the low-quality service they provided, and kick back the remaining $30,000 in cash directly to Caryn. It was a classic skimming operation. Caryn would pocket $30,000 tax-free, her friend would get a massive payday for a weekend of work, and Matt would be none the wiser, simply writing it off as the cost of doing business to get Amy off the property. But for this scam to work, they had to actually move Amy. And that is where the tragedy for Amy began. Because the company was part of a grift, they didn't care about the quality of the work. They weren't professionals. When moving day arrived, Amy allegedly noted that the crew looked unkempt and disorganized. They didn't have uniforms. They didn't have the proper padding or wrapping materials for antique furniture. But at that point, the truck was there. The deadline was looming, and she felt she had no choice but to let them proceed. We have to imagine the stress Amy was under. She is leaving the only home she has known for decades, emotional and vulnerable, and suddenly these rough characters are handling her most updated possessions. The reports state that the movers were reckless. They were rushing. They were tossing boxes marked fragile as if they were filled with pillows. Amy tried to intervene, tried to tell them to be careful with the china cabinet, to watch out for the grandfather clock, but they reportedly dismissed her concerns, acting as if they were doing her a favor. The move itself was chaos, but the real horror was revealed when the truck arrived at Amy's new house. As they began to unload, the extent of the negligence became heartbreakingly clear. We aren't just talking about a few scratched floors or a chipped plate. We are talking about destruction. According to the claims made later, thousands of dollars worth of furniture arrived damaged. A custom dining table had a leg snapped clean off. The upholstery on her sofas was ripped and stained with grease from the truck. An antique dresser that had been in her family for generations was gouged so deeply it was essentially ruined. But the physical damage to the furniture was only half of the nightmare. The most devastating part of this ordeal was the missing items. When the dust settled and Amy began the long, lonely process of unpacking, she realized that several boxes were simply gone. These weren't boxes of old kitchen towels or Tupperware. These were the boxes containing the sentimental history of her life. We are hearing that boxes containing original photo albums of the kids growing up, personalized ornaments from their first Christmases, and even memorabilia from her wedding, items she kept for their historical value to the family, were missing. Amy was frantic. She called the number on the card the movers had given her, but it went straight to a full voicemail box. She called Caryn, demanding to know who these people were. Caryn reportedly brushed her off, telling her that moves are always messy and that she should just look harder for the boxes. It was gaslighting at its finest. Amy felt crazy. She knew those boxes were on the truck. She saw them leave the farm. But they never made it into the new house. Devastated and furious, Amy decided she wasn't going to let this slide. She is a strong woman, and while the emotional toll was heavy, the financial and sentimental loss was too great to ignore. She attempted to file a claim for the damages. This is standard procedure. You hire movers, they break something, their insurance pays for it. But when Amy's lawyer began to dig into the company to file the claim, they hit a brick wall. The company didn't have insurance. In fact, legally speaking, the company barely existed. It was a shell, a phantom entity registered to a P.O. box that hadn't been checked in months. This was the moment the realization hit Amy. This wasn't just bad luck. This was negligence, and possibly something worse. She requested the invoice from Matt. She wanted to see exactly what had been paid for this horrific service. When she finally got her hands on that piece of paper, her lawyer nearly fell out of his chair. The invoice was for $50,000. The line items were absurd: charges for specialized handling that never happened, premium packing materials that were never used, and white glove service that resulted in broken heirlooms. Amy's legal team knew immediately that this was fraud. No legitimate moving company charges that amount for a local move of that size without providing impeccable service. They started to connect the dots. Caryn organized it. The company was unknown. The cost was inflated. The service was non-existent. It reeked of a kickback. And that is when Amy decided to do the bravest thing she could have done. She filed a lawsuit. She didn't just sue the moving company, which had already vanished into thin air. She sued Matt and Caryn. The lawsuit alleged breach of contract, gross negligence, and conspiracy to defraud. It was a bold move. Suing her ex-husband and his girlfriend, who are also her co-stars on a hit reality show, was a nuclear option. But Amy was done being the victim. She wanted answers, and she wanted justice for the memories that had been stolen from her. The legal battle that ensued was reportedly intense. Matt tried to settle out of court immediately. He allegedly offered to pay for the damaged furniture if she would just drop it. He didn't want the bad press. He didn't want the details of his finances and Caryn's involvement to become public record. But Amy refused. This wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the principle. She wanted to know why Caryn had hired these people. She wanted to know where the money went. As the case moved toward a hearing, Amy's team hired a private investigator. They needed to find the owner of the moving company. If they could find him, they could crack the case wide open. The PI did some incredible work, tracking down leads through state records and old business filings. They couldn't find the owner. He had seemingly skipped town or gone underground. But they found someone even better. They found his ex-wife. Now, we all know there is no witness more dangerous than a disgruntled ex-spouse. The PI tracked her down to a small apartment on the outskirts of Portland. When they approached her, she was initially hesitant to talk, but once she heard that her ex-husband had been involved in scamming Amy Roloff, a woman she watched on TV and respected, she opened up. And what she had to say was the smoking gun Amy's lawyers had been praying for. The ex-wife, let's call her Brenda, revealed that her ex-husband had come home one night boasting about a golden goose job. He told her that he had connected with an old friend named Caryn who needed a favor that would pay out big time. Brenda told the investigators that she distinctly remembered him talking about the numbers. Write it up for 50, give me 20, and bring me back 30. She said he laughed about it, calling it the easiest money he ever made. He even joked that the little lady wouldn't notice a few broken chairs because she would be too busy crying about leaving the farm. This testimony was explosive. It directly implicated Caryn in a conspiracy. It wasn't just that she hired a bad mover. She orchestrated a theft of Matt's money and knowingly exposed Amy's property to risk just to make a quick buck. Armed with this sworn affidavit from the ex-wife, Amy's lawyers were ready for court. Imagine the scene in the courtroom. You have Matt looking uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. You have Caryn looking stoic, perhaps a bit nervous behind her designer glasses. And you have Amy sitting upright, determined, with her legal team beside her. The tension must have been palpable. The judge, a no-nonsense figure who had seen plenty of family disputes, likely thought this was just another rich family squabble until the evidence started to come out. The opening arguments painted a picture of betrayal. Amy's lawyer argued that Matt had a fiduciary duty to ensure the move was handled properly since he mandated it and paid for it. By delegating it to Caryn, he accepted liability for her actions. And Caryn, by hiring an unlicensed friend and inflating the bill, had committed fraud. They argued that the damage to the furniture was a direct result of this illicit scheme. If a legitimate company had been hired for $50,000, Amy's things would have been treated with the utmost care. Instead, the money was siphoned off and Amy paid the price. The defense tried to argue that Matt was simply being generous by paying for the move and that they couldn't be held responsible for the incompetence of a third-party vendor. Caryn's lawyer tried to dismiss the ex-wife's testimony as hearsay, the ramblings of a bitter woman trying to hurt her ex-husband. They claimed Caryn had no knowledge of the kickback and that she was a victim of the moving company as well. It was a classic deny, deny, deny strategy. But the evidence was mounting. Amy's team presented the invoice. They brought in expert witnesses, professional movers who testified that the invoice was a complete fabrication, listing services that are standard in the industry but were clearly not performed. They showed photos of the damaged furniture, the jagged wood of the broken table leg, the deep scratches in the heirloom dresser. The visual evidence of negligence was undeniable. And then came the moment that turned the tide of the entire trial. The cross-examination of the moving company owner's ex-wife. We mentioned earlier that the PI found her, but seeing her take the stand was a different ballgame. She was sworn in, and the courtroom fell silent. Amy's lawyer Prior approached the stand. "You were married to the man who moved my client, correct?" the lawyer asked. "Unfortunately, yes," she replied, her voice steady. "Did he have a legitimate, insured moving business?" "Heavens no," she scoffed. "It was just him and his buddies and a rented truck. He didn't even own a dolly half the time." The courtroom murmured. This confirmed the negligence. But the lawyer pressed on for the kill shot regarding the fraud. "Can you tell the court how he obtained this contract with the defendants?" She looked directly at Caryn. "He got a call from his friend Caryn. I heard him on the phone. She told him to write up a bill for $50,000. She said she'd get the check cut, but that he had to kick back the rest to her in cash. He bragged about it for weeks, called it their retirement fund." You could hear a pin drop. Caryn's face reportedly went pale. Matt looked at Caryn with a mixture of shock and confusion. Or perhaps he was just realizing that his checkbook had been used against him. The ex-wife continued, detailing how her ex-husband had met Caryn in a parking lot to hand over the envelope of cash. She provided dates that aligned perfectly with the withdrawal records and the timeline of the move. This was the turning point. The judge was visibly unimpressed with the defendants. The narrative had shifted from a simple contract dispute to a story of greed and malice. Amy sat there listening to the confirmation of what she had suspected in her gut. It wasn't just incompetence, it was a setup. They had used her vulnerability during the move to line their pockets. The defense tried to rattle the ex-wife, asking if she was being paid for her testimony, asking if she hated her ex-husband, but she held firm. She said she didn't want anything from them. She just didn't think it was right what they did to Amy. "I watched the show," she said. "I know how much that farm meant to her. To steal from her on her way out, that's just low." With the testimony concluded, the case moved to the closing arguments. Amy's lawyer delivered a passionate speech about the value of home and memories. He argued that while the $50,000 was stolen from Matt, the real victim was Amy. She lost irreplaceable items, she suffered emotional distress, and she was left to pick up the pieces of her broken belongings while Caryn allegedly went shopping with the kickback money. He asked the judge not just for reimbursement, but for punitive damages. He wanted to send a message that this kind of deceit would not be tolerated. The judge took the case under advisement, promising a ruling shortly. The wait was agonizing for Amy. She had put everything on the line. If she lost, she would be stuck with legal fees and the knowledge that they got away with it. But she held her head high, knowing she had exposed the truth. Finally, the day of the verdict arrived. The parties gathered back in the courtroom. The atmosphere was heavy. The judge entered, took his seat, and looked over his glasses at the defendants. He didn't mince words. He started by addressing the nature of the move. He spoke about the trust involved when someone hires a mover to handle their life's possessions. The defendants did not simply hire a moving company, the judge began, his voice booming through the silent room. They conspired to defraud the plaintiff while exposing her personal property to gross negligence. This is a shocking breach of good faith. Amy squeezed her lawyer's hand. He believed them. He saw through the lies. The judge continued, the evidence provided by the witness regarding the financial arrangement is credible and aligns with the fraudulent nature of the invoice presented. It is the ruling of this court that the defendants acted with malice. Judgment is for the plaintiff. This was it, the win. But what came next was the number that shocked everyone. The judge wasn't just going to make them pay for the broken table. He was going to make them pay for the entire scheme. The defendants will reimburse Ms. Roloff for the full $50,000 fraudulent moving invoice, the judge declared. They will also pay $100,000 for the replacement value of her damaged furniture and the restoration of antique items. Gasp could be heard in the gallery. That was already $150,000. But the judge wasn't done. He looked at Amy with sympathy. For the loss of irreplaceable heirlooms and the emotional distress caused by this intentional scheme, the defendants are ordered to pay an additional $100,000. The total judgment is $250,000. $250,000, $250,000. Amy had sued for justice, and she had been awarded a fortune. Matt and Caryn were reportedly stunned into silence. The scheme to make $30,000 had cost them nearly 10 times that amount. It was the ultimate backfire. Amy walked out of that courtroom a victor. But the story doesn't end there. The aftermath of this verdict is where things get really interesting. Because now Amy had a check for $250,000, and she knew exactly what she was going to do with it. She wasn't going to just put it in the bank. She was going to use it to complete her transition from the farm in the most spectacular way possible. We are going to break down exactly how Amy spent that money, the reaction from the rest of the Roloff family, and the chaotic fallout between Matt and Caryn. Rumor has it that this lawsuit has caused a massive rift at the farm, with Matt blaming Caryn for the humiliation and the financial hit. We will also dive into the specifics of the new furniture Amy bought, pieces that are far nicer than anything she had at the farmhouse, and how she is living her best life on their dime. You do not want to miss the details of the revenge renovation that Amy just completed. But first, let's analyze why this story resonates so much with us. It's because it validates everything we have felt about the dynamic on the show for years. We always suspected that Amy was being pushed out, that she was being treated unfairly. This verdict, this legal confirmation, proves that it wasn't just editing, it wasn't just drama for the cameras. There was real, tangible mistreatment happening. The fact that they would try to profit off her departure is a level of pettiness that is hard to comprehend. Think about the psychology of it. Caryn is the one who is taking Amy's place. She is the one living the life Amy built. Why did she need to twist the knife? Why did she need to squeeze an extra few dollars out of the situation? Greed is a powerful motivator, but it also blinds people to risks. They thought Amy was too emotional, too scattered, or too nice to fight back. They underestimated her. They thought she would just cry over the broken dishes and move on. They didn't count on her hiring a shark of a lawyer and a private investigator. They didn't count on the ex-wife. This victory is for every person who has ever been underestimated. It's for everyone who has been taken advantage of during a vulnerable time. Amy stood up to the bullies, and she won. And the best part, she did it with class. She didn't go on social media and rant. She didn't scream at them in public. She let the legal system do the talking. And the legal system screamed loud and clear, pay up. As we move into the next segment, keep in mind the shift in power. Matt has always held the financial cards. He owns the land, he runs the business. Amy has often been portrayed as the one asking for things, the one needing the buyout. But this lawsuit flipped the script. Suddenly, Matt is the one writing the check to Amy, not for a buyout, but for a penalty. It's a humiliation that a man like Matt Roloff does not take lightly. And for Caryn, this exposes her in a way that the show never did. It strips away the helpful girlfriend persona and reveals something much more calculating. Stay tuned, because when we come back, we are going deep into the fallout. We're talking about the silent treatment at family gatherings, the awkward run-ins, and the luxury upgrades Amy is making to her new home. This is the sweet taste of victory, and we are going to savor every bite of it. We are back, and if you are just joining us, you need to buckle up, because the story of Amy Roloff's $250,000 victory over Matt and Caryn is about to take a turn into absolute luxury and pure, unadulterated revenge. We established in the last segment that the judge threw the book at Matt and Caryn, ordering them to pay $250,000 for the fraudulent moving scheme, the kickbacks, and the destruction of Amy's property. Now, we are going to talk about the part of the story that usually happens after the credits roll. We are talking about the spending spree, but this wasn't just any shopping trip. This was a calculated, symbolic reinvention of Amy Roloff's life, funded entirely by the people who tried to scam her. According to exclusive reports from insiders close to Amy's new inner circle, the moment that check from Matt cleared, and believe me, we are hearing that Matt waited until the very last legally mandated day to wire those funds, Amy wasted no time. For years, living in that farmhouse, Amy was surrounded by history, yes, but also by a lot of old heavy furniture that suited the farm aesthetic but didn't necessarily reflect her own personal style. She was living in Matt's world, surrounded by Matt's projects. Now, with a fresh $250,000 in her pocket, specifically designated for replacement value and emotional distress, she decided to build Amy's world. Sources tell us that Amy hired a high-end interior designer, someone who usually works with the pearl-clutching elite of Portland's West Hills, and gave them a very specific directive: new, modern, mine. The first thing to go was the memory of that broken dining room table. You remember the one the movers snapped the leg off of? Well, Amy reportedly replaced it with a custom-made, solid walnut slab table imported from Italy. We are talking about a piece of furniture that costs more than most people's cars. The irony here is delicious. Matt Roloff prides himself on wood, on building things, on the rustic aesthetic. For Amy to use his money to buy a sleek European masterpiece that is the complete opposite of the farm style is a subtle but powerful dig. Every time she sits at that table to host a dinner party, she knows that Matt's attempted grift paid for every square inch of that wood. But she didn't stop there. The insider theories regarding her living room renovation are even more juicy. Remember the grease-stained sofas? Amy reportedly went to a luxury showroom and ordered custom velvet furniture in jewel tones, rich emeralds, and deep sapphires. These are colors that pop, colors that scream royalty. It's a stark contrast to the dusty earth tone palette of the farm. One source claims that when Amy saw the final bill for the living room setup, which was rumored to be upwards of $40,000, she simply smiled and said, "Put it on the Matt card." That is the energy we are loving. She turned a traumatic event into a complete upgrade. She didn't just replace what she lost. She elevated her standard of living far beyond what it was at the farmhouse. Let's talk about the lost heirlooms for a second. The court awarded her $100,000 for the sentimental value of those missing boxes. You can't replace photos or old ornaments, and that pain never truly goes away. However, Amy reportedly used a portion of that money to create a new legacy. We are hearing whispers that she commissioned a local artist to paint portraits of her children and grandchildren, creating new heirlooms to hang on her walls. She also reportedly started a college fund for the grandkids with the remainder of the cash. So, in a twisted way, Matt and Caryn's greed is now paying for the future education of Jackson, Lila, Ember, and Bode. It is the ultimate circle of justice. Matt's money, which he tried to hoard, is going to his grandkids anyway, but only because Amy forced his hand through a lawsuit. Now, while Amy was popping champagne and picking out fabric swatches, the scene over at Roloff Farms was reportedly nothing short of a war zone. We have to shift our focus to the fallout between Matt and Caryn, because this is where the reality TV gets real. You have to understand the dynamic here. Matt is a control freak. He likes to be the smartest guy in the room. He likes to think he has an angle for everything. Getting caught in a clumsy, low-rent kickback scam is embarrassing for him. It damages his reputation as a savvy businessman. According to reports from staff who work on the farm, the weeks following the verdict were some of the tensest in the history of the property. The rumor is that Matt was absolutely furious with Caryn. Even though the court found them both liable, the narrative inside the big house was that this was Caryn's mess. Remember, the testimony stated that Caryn was the one who called the friend. Caryn was the one who set up the 20 for you, 30 for me deal. Matt's defense, at least to himself, is likely that he just signed the check and trusted her. We are hearing about shouting matches that could be heard from the pumpkin patch. One source claims Matt accused Caryn of being sloppy and greedy. He allegedly shouted, "I would have paid 50 grand just to get her out. Why did you have to get cute with the kickback?" This is a fascinating insight into Matt's psychology. He isn't necessarily mad that they did it. He is mad that they got caught. He is mad that her retirement fund scheme ended up costing him $250,000. That is a massive hit to the farm's liquid cash flow, especially with all the other construction projects he always has going on. And let's look at Caryn's side of this alleged fight. She is likely feeling scapegoated. In her mind, she has been managing Matt's life, handling the messy emotional labor of dealing with Amy and trying to save a buck here and there. She probably feels that Matt knew exactly what was going on, or at least chose to look the other way, until it blew up. Now that the check has to be written, he is throwing her under the bus. There are rumors swirling that Matt actually made Caryn pay a portion of the judgment out of her own pocket. While Matt has the big money, Caryn isn't poor. However, a hit like that would devastate her personal savings. If Matt forced her to liquidate assets to pay her share of the damages, that would explain the icy demeanor fans have noticed between them in recent sightings. This lawsuit has reportedly introduced a seed of distrust that is rotting the foundation of their relationship. Think about it. Matt now knows that Caryn is capable of skimming off the top. If she did it with the movers, where else has she done it? Is she taking a cut of the pumpkin salsa sales? Is she inflating the costs of the wedding barn renovations? Once you know your partner is willing to run a grift, you start looking at every invoice a little differently. We have heard theories that Matt has quietly hired a forensic accountant to review the farm's books over the last 3 years. If that is true, and if they find more discrepancies, this could be the end of Matt and Caryn. But the fallout doesn't stop with the couple. We have to talk about the kids. The Roloff children, Zach, Jeremy, Molly, and Jacob, have had a complicated relationship with the farm and the divorce. But this lawsuit, this is a bombshell that forces them to pick sides in a way they never had to before. Let's start with Zach and Tori. We all know the tension that exists there. The failed negotiations for the farm broke Zach's heart. He already feels that his dad values money over family. When news of this verdict reached them, and Amy told them every single detail, it must have been pure validation. For Zach, this confirms the narrative that Matt is manipulative and that Caryn is an interloper who doesn't have the family's best interests at heart. We are hearing reports that Zach has effectively cut off communication with Caryn entirely. He won't let the kids be around her unsupervised. If she is willing to scam their grandmother, what is she willing to do to them? The trust is gone. Jeremy and Audrey are a different story. They tend to try and stay more neutral, or at least appear that way for their own brand. But even Jeremy, who often tries to see Matt's business perspective, reportedly couldn't defend this. There is no business perspective for hiring an uninsured mover to kick back cash. It's just theft. Sources suggest that Jeremy had a very difficult man-to-man conversation with Matt. He allegedly told his dad that this was beneath him and that it made the whole family look like criminals. Matt, being Matt, probably tried to spin it, blaming the lawyers or the misunderstanding, but the damage is done. The respect is eroding. And let's not forget Jacob, the rebel of the family, the one who always calls out the fakeness of the production. Jacob has likely been laughing his head off about this. He has always been skeptical of the farm's commercialization. To him, this is just proof of the corruption he has always talked about. We wouldn't be surprised to see a cryptic tweet from Jacob alluding to karma or greed in the coming weeks. The ripple effect of this lawsuit extends into the community of Helvetia and the greater Portland area. You have to remember, the Roloffs are local celebrities. They know everyone. When a judgment like this comes down, it becomes public record. The local contractors, the other farmers, the people at the grocery store, they all know. And the reputation of Roloff Farms has taken a hit. We've heard that some local businesses are now hesitant to work with Matt and Caryn, demanding upfront payment because they don't want to get caught in some invoice scheme. The handshake deal days are over for Matt Roloff. He is now viewed as a liability. There is also a very interesting theory circulating regarding the show itself. How is TLC handling this? Usually they love drama, but this is the kind of drama that involves legal fraud. The network reportedly had a crisis meeting. They can't air the footage of the trial because cameras aren't allowed, but they are terrified of the liability. If it comes out that production knew about these shady movers and did nothing, they could be sued too. So the producers are reportedly scrambling to edit around this. They might try to bury the story or present a watered-down version where Amy had a bad moving experience without mentioning the fraud or the kickbacks. This is why you need channels like this one. We tell you what the network is scared to show, but let's go back to the most mysterious part of this saga, the lost boxes. We mentioned earlier that the judge awarded money for them, but there is a darker theory emerging from the investigation. During the discovery phase of the lawsuit, Amy's lawyer reportedly found emails between Caryn and the moving company owner that hinted at storage. The theory, and I stress this is a theory, is that the boxes weren't lost, they were stolen. The speculation is that Caryn might have instructed the movers to set aside certain boxes that looked valuable or personal, perhaps to hold them as leverage later, or simply out of spite. Imagine if 5 years from now, those lost photo albums suddenly appear in an auction or are found in a barn on Matt's property. It would be the ultimate twist. Some insiders believe that the movers, knowing they were doing a shady job, kept the boxes as insurance. If Matt or Caryn ever refused to pay them or tried to rat them out, they could say, "We have the grandmother's wedding dress." It's a chilling thought, but in the world of petty grievances and cash kickbacks, nothing is off the table. Amy has the money now, but she doesn't have her history. That is a wound that Caryn inflicted that money can't fully heal, and it's why the fan base has turned on Caryn so viciously. Speaking of the fans, the reaction online has been nuclear. Since the details of this lawsuit started leaking, The comment sections on Matt and Caryn's social media have been flooded with snake emojis. People are calling for Caryn to be fired from the show. They are calling for a boycott of pumpkin season. This isn't just reality TV villain stuff anymore. This is real world villainy. There is a petition circulating with thousands of signatures demanding that TLC remove Caryn from the narrative. While TLC rarely listens to petitions, the bad press is undeniable. Matt is used to being the bad guy, but he usually spins it as making tough business decisions. There is no spin for this. You can't explain away a kickback from a fake moving company. Now, I want to dive a little deeper into the financial mechanics of how this $250,000 payment went down, because it reveals a lot about the current state of Roloff Farms. We know Matt has assets, but he is also land rich and cash poor in many ways. He is constantly reinvesting. To pull out $250,000 in liquid cash on short notice is painful. We have heard a rumor that Matt had to sell a piece of heavy machinery, one of his beloved excavators or tractors, to cover the judgment quickly without liquidating stocks that would trigger a tax event. Picture that scene. Matt Roloff, a man who loves his toys, watching a flatbed truck haul away one of his prized excavators because his girlfriend tried to scam his ex-wife out of $30,000. It is poetic justice of the highest order. Every time he drives past the spot where that tractor used to be, he is reminded of the failure. And he blames Caryn for the loss of that machine. He likely brings it up in every argument. I had to sell the Kubota because of you. This is the fuel that will burn their relationship to the ground eventually. On the flip side, let's look at how Amy is carrying herself now. Since the check cleared and the furniture was delivered, sources say Amy is a new woman. For a long time after the divorce, she seemed unsure. She was second-guessing herself. She was the woman who was left behind. But winning this lawsuit has given her a spine of steel. She walked into the fire, took on the powerful ex-husband, and won. She is reportedly walking taller. She is more assertive in her new marriage with Chris. Interestingly, reports say Chris Mark was a huge support during this. He didn't intervene, but he encouraged her to fight. He's a realtor. He knows contracts. He smelled a rat regarding the moving company early on. Having Chris in her corner, validating her feelings that the invoice looked fake, was crucial. This victory is also a win for their marriage. It closes the door on the Matt chapter with a finality that the divorce papers didn't quite achieve. The divorce separated them legally, but this lawsuit separated them morally. It proved that Amy is the victim and Matt and Caryn are the aggressors legally and publicly. What does this mean for the future of Little People, Big World? This is the million-dollar question. Can they film together after this? Can they sit at a picnic table and pretend to have a civilized conversation about the kids when Amy knows they stole from her and they know she took a huge chunk of their money? The production is going to have a nightmare trying to force these interactions. We predict that the next season will be very segmented. We will see Amy and Chris living their best life, traveling, and enjoying their new high-end furniture. And we will see Matt and Caryn on the farm, miserable, bickering, and dealing with financial stress. The contrast will be the storyline. The editors, if they are smart, will lean into this. They will show the shiny new table at Amy's house and then cut to Matt complaining about the budget for the pumpkin patch. They will show Amy laughing with her friends and then cut to Caryn looking stressed and isolated. The narrative arc has shifted. Amy is no longer the underdog. She is the champion. There is also a rumor that Amy is writing a book. Not a cookbook, but a memoir. And now that this lawsuit is public record, she isn't bound by a non-disclosure agreement regarding the trial. She can tell the whole story. Imagine a chapter titled The Move. Imagine her detailing the moment she found out about the kickback. Matt and Caryn must be terrified of this. If Amy puts this in print, it cements their legacy as grifters forever. We are hearing that Matt's lawyers have already sent cease and desist letters trying to preemptively stop her from discussing the business details of the move, but legal experts say that since the verdict is public, she can say whatever she wants. The empowerment of Amy Roloff is the headline here. She turned a scam into a scholarship for her grandkids and a renovation for her home. She took the lemons, rotten, bruised lemons thrown at her by her ex, and she didn't just make lemonade. She opened a lemonade franchise. But there is one more layer to this aftermath that we haven't touched on yet, and that is the mole. How did Amy's lawyer know exactly where to look? How did the PI find the ex-wife so fast? There is a theory circulating on the message boards that someone on the inside of the farm tipped Amy off. Someone who knew about the phone call Caryn made. Could it be a disgruntled farmhand? Could it be one of the kids? Or could it have been Caryn's own son? We know there has been drama there in the past. If someone close to Caryn dropped a dime on her to Amy's team, that betrayal is even deeper than the lawsuit. It suggests that the people around Caryn see through her too. As we wrap up this segment of the story, I want you to visualize the current state of affairs. Amy is sitting on a velvet sofa, sipping wine, looking at a custom painting of her grandchildren. Matt is walking around a muddy farm, missing a tractor, staring at a bank account that is $250,000 lighter, and side-eyeing the woman standing next to him. The balance of power has fundamentally shifted. The leaving the farm saga didn't end with Amy driving away in a U-Haul. It ended with Amy driving to the bank. In the final part of this video, we are going to look toward the future. We have some explosive predictions about the next season, including a rumor that Matt is planning to sell the farm entirely because he can no longer afford the upkeep after this financial hit. We will also discuss the possibility of Caryn leaving Matt now that the money is getting tight. Is she a ride or die, or was she just there for the ride? The lawsuit might have exposed more than just a moving scam. It might have exposed the expiration date on their relationship. You do not want to miss the conclusion of this report. We are going to connect all the dots and tell you exactly where this train wreck is heading. Stick around, because the final twist involving the ownership of the big house will blow your mind. We are receiving bombshell reports suggesting that Matt Roloff is currently in a state of financial panic. You might be thinking, Matt is rich, he has TV money, he has the farm, but let's peel back the curtain on the reality of his finances. Matt is what financial experts call asset rich and cash poor. His wealth is tied up in the dirt, in the pumpkins, and in half-finished construction projects. He leverages everything. He borrows against the land to build a new barn, borrows against the barn to build a house. It is a house of cards built on debt and cash flow. When the judge ordered him to pay $250,000 in liquid cash immediately to Amy, that wasn't just a penalty. It was a wrecking ball to his operating budget. We mentioned earlier that he allegedly had to sell an excavator, but new theories suggest it is much worse than that. We are hearing that the dream house construction, that massive mansion he has been building for himself and Caryn, has ground to a complete halt. Neighbors have reported that the construction crews have vanished. The heavy machinery is sitting idle, gathering rust in the Oregon rain. Why? Because you can't pay contractors with pumpkins. You need cash, and Amy has all the cash. The rumor is that Matt has defaulted on payments to his builders because the liquidity he had set aside for the roof and the electrical work had to be diverted to pay the judgment for the moving scam. Imagine the humiliation. Matt Roloff, the great builder, the man with the grand vision, living in a half-finished construction site because his ex-wife outsmarted him in court. It is the ultimate symbol of his hubris. He tried to cheat her on the way out, and now he can't afford to stay in. This leads us to the most shocking prediction of all, the fire sale. Insiders are buzzing with the theory that Matt is quietly preparing to list the big house, the original farmhouse that Amy lived in, for sale to the general public. We know he tried to sell it before at an astronomical price and it didn't move. But now, the strategy has reportedly changed. He isn't looking for a profit. He is looking for a lifeline. The theory is that he is going to drop the price drastically to get a quick sale, just to stop the bleeding. He needs to replenish the coffers before the bank comes calling about his construction loans. But here is the twist that will blow your mind. There is a very specific rumor circulating among the most dedicated fan sleuths. Who has cash right now? Who has a motive to preserve the family legacy? Who hates seeing the farm chopped up and sold to strangers? The kids, specifically a consortium involving Zach and potentially even Jacob. The theory goes like this. Amy, flush with her $250,000 payout in her own savings, might be quietly backing the kids to buy the house back. Imagine a scenario where a blind trust makes an offer on the house. Matt, desperate for cash, accepts it, thinking he is selling to a developer. Then, when the papers are signed, the trust reveals the beneficiaries, his own children, and Amy. It would be a hostile takeover of the heart of the farm. Amy wouldn't live there. She loves her new house, but she would own a piece of the history again, ensuring that Matt can never fully erase her. It would be the ultimate power move, using the money from the kickback scam to buy back the scene of the crime. While this is, the mere possibility keeps us up at night. It fits the narrative arc perfectly. The farm returns to the family, not through Matt's generosity, but through his failure. Now, let's talk about Caryn. Where does she fit into this collapsing empire? We have to ask the hard question. Is Caryn a ride-or-die partner? Or was she here for the lifestyle? For years, Caryn has enjoyed the perks of being the farm manager and the girlfriend of the star. She has gone on trips, lived in nice houses, and been on TV. But the dynamic has shifted. Matt is no longer the benevolent provider. He is a stressed out, angry man who is blaming her for a massive financial loss. The fun is over. The reality has set in. Sources indicate that Caryn has been spending significantly more time in Arizona recently, far away from the mud and the misery of the farm. She calls it visiting her parents or checking on her house, but insiders believe this is a soft launch of a breakup. It's an exit strategy. If the money dries up and the construction on their dream home is stalled indefinitely, what is left for her there? She is being vilified by the fans, sued by the ex-wife, and yelled at by Matt. That is not a retirement plan. That is a nightmare. We predict that if Matt is forced to sell off significant assets, or if he can't finish the new house by next season, Caryn will quietly fade out of the picture. We might see a press release citing growing apart or different life paths, but we will know the truth. The lawsuit broke them. It exposed the cracks in their foundation. You can't build a relationship on a shared grift. Once the grift fails, the relationship fails. The irony is that Caryn wanted that $30,000 kickback for her retirement fund, and that greed might end up costing her the entire relationship and her spot on the show. Speaking of the show, how does TLC handle this train wreck? We touched on this earlier, but the implications for the future of Little People, Big World are massive. The show has always relied on the tension between Matt and Amy, but there was always an underlying respect, or at least a history. That is gone now. You cannot film a pumpkin festival with two people who just battled over a fraud lawsuit. The liability is too high. There is a strong theory that TLC might be planning to cancel the show in its current format and pivot to a spinoff. Imagine a show focused entirely on Amy and Chris and Zach and Tori. A show about the new generation and the happy life away from the farm. They could cut Matt and Caryn out entirely. Without the cameras, Matt loses his biggest revenue stream. If the show gets canceled, the farm likely goes under. Matt needs the show to drive traffic to the pumpkin patch. Amy doesn't need the show. She has her cooking, her speaking engagements, and her settlement money. She holds all the cards. If TLC does keep filming Matt, it will likely be for the villain arc. We will watch him struggle. We will watch him try to spin the narrative. But the audience has woken up. We saw the court documents, metaphorically speaking. We know the truth. Every time Matt complains about money on screen, we will shout at the TV, "It's because you tried to scam Amy." The suspension of disbelief is broken. Let's return to the mystery of the lost boxes one last time, because there is a final chilling detail that has emerged from the rumor mill. We talked about the theory that the movers or Caryn kept the boxes. Well, a viewer recently posted on a forum claiming to have seen a very specific item in a consignment shop in a town just outside of where Caryn's relatives live. The item was a vintage hand-carved clock, very similar to one Amy has described as missing. If this is true, it suggests that the lost items weren't lost. They were fenced. They were sold for cash. This takes the scam from negligence to criminal enterprise. If Amy gets wind of this, if she can prove that her heirlooms were sold by someone connected to Caryn, we are looking at a second lawsuit. We are looking at criminal charges. This story is not over. It is a dormant volcano waiting to erupt again. Amy's lawyer is likely still digging. That private investigator is probably still on the payroll. Matt and Caryn might think the check they wrote bought them silence, but it only bought them a temporary reprieve. So, what is the moral of this story? What can we, the viewers, take away from the leaving the farm moving scam? It is a lesson in karma. It is a lesson that you reap what you sow. Matt and Caryn thought they were untouchable. They thought they could treat Amy like an inconvenience, a line item to be managed and exploited. They thought her kindness was a weakness. They were wrong. Amy Roloff's journey from the heartbroken woman leaving her home to the victorious queen of her new castle is the character arc we have been waiting for. She didn't just survive the move. She profited from the attempt to sabotage it. She turned their greed into her gain, and she did it while keeping her integrity. She didn't scam anyone. She didn't lie. She just told the truth in a court of law. As we look toward the next season or whatever comes next for this family, keep your eyes peeled for the subtle signs. Watch the furniture in Amy's house. It's the trophy of her victory. Watch the lack of progress on Matt's house. It's the monument to his failure. Watch the distance between Matt and Caryn. It's the cost of their conspiracy. The farm, once a place of joy and family, has become a symbol of division. But maybe, just maybe, it had to break so it could be fixed. Maybe Matt has to lose it all to understand what he actually had. And maybe Amy had to leave it to find her true worth. We will be tracking this story aggressively. We have alerts set for property listings in Helvetia. We are monitoring the court dockets for any new filings. We are watching Caryn's social media for any sign of a move to Arizona. You can count on us to bring you the updates that the network tries to bury. This has been a deep dive into the darkest chapter of Little People, Big World. It's a story of betrayal, justice, and the high price of a quick buck. We hope this breakdown has opened your eyes to the reality behind the reality TV screen. The editing room can hide a lot of things, but it can't hide a court judgment. If you enjoyed this investigative report and want to see more content exposing the truth about your favorite reality stars, you know what to do. Please hit that like button. It seriously helps the algorithm get this truth out to more fans. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Join the LPBW Update family. We are the only channel brave enough to tell it like it is. Leave a comment down below with your theory. Do you think Matt will be forced to sell the farm to pay his debts? And do you think Caryn will stick around if the money runs out? I read every single comment, and I want to know what you think. Thank you for watching. Thank you for seeking the truth. And until next time, keep watching the background, because that's where the real story happens. This is LPBW Update, signing off.